So last episode, we cracked open the machinery, how these drugs actually work, the brakes on your hunger, the signal to your brain, the whole control system, they're turning up. So by now, you know the weight loss part. Everybody knows the weight loss part. But what else are these drugs doing? What's beyond the shot? I get asked in my clinic all the time about addiction, less desire for alcohol, inflammation going down. These drugs are doing things in the body that have nothing to do with the number on the scale. They're having an impact on your heart, your kidneys, your liver. There's even data on cravings like alcohol and cigarettes, the stuff that has zero to do with eating. And some of these benefits, they are showing up before you've lost barely any weight, even within days of the first injection, which means it's not just lose weight, get healthier. Something else is going on. So today we go beyond the shot. What else is this thing doing in there? I'm Dr. Michelle Gilliatte, double board certified in family and obesity medicine and founder of SomaV Wellness Center and Med Spa. And this is the Vital Link. And this is the series, The Skinny on the Shot. So let's start with the number one killer in America, cardiovascular disease, the heart. There was a trial, a big one, called the SELECT trial, over 17,000 people. And these weren't people with diabetes. These were people with obesity or overweight who already had heart disease. Half got semaglutide, half got a placebo, and nobody knew who was getting which. Not the patients, not even the doctors running it. It's the gold standard, the most trustworthy kind of study we have in all of medicine. And the result, over about 3 years, the semaglutide group had a 20% lower rate of major heart events, heart attacks, strokes, and cardiovascular deaths. But that 20% refers to something called the relative risk reduction. Most studies quote this number because it sounds a lot bigger. But the whole purpose of the Vital Link is to connect the true dots for you. So let me break the figures down just a little bit. So out of 100 people on the placebo, the fake shot, about 8 had a major heart event over those 3 years that they studied. Out of 100 people on the semaglutide, about 6.5 did. So the actual gap between the two groups is really only about 1.5 people out of 100. That number, that 1.5, is called the absolute risk reduction. 1.5%. So where does this 20% come from? That is called the relative risk reduction. It's the same 1.5 person difference, but measured against the placebo group's rate instead of everybody, the 17,000 people. Out of those 8 people who had a cardiovascular disease, 8 out of 100 on the placebo shot, the fake shot, only 6.5 people actually had a cardiovascular event on the semaglutide. So the actual gap between the two groups is only 1.5. I know, it gets super confusing. And if you don't understand, just stay with me. I'm going to go over studies in another episode so that you guys can get clarification on when you see those ads on the TV. So drug ads are always going to quote you that 20% because it's a bigger, sexier number, right? So the honest number is the 1.5%. But what do these numbers really mean for us? We use them to figure out something called the number needed to treat. How many people do we have to put on this drug to prevent one heart event? That's 1.5 out of 100 works out to about roughly 67 people. 67 people who need to be on this medication followed over about 3 years to prevent one heart attack, stroke, or cardiac death. So, and look, this does not mean you have to be on it for 3 years. That's just the window the study followed people for. It's the stretch of time they actually measured. So it's essentially what we can actually speak to, honestly. The benefits don't switch off after 3 years. That's just where the data stops. And the benefits don't start at 3 years. It's just the data that was studied. So you might be thinking now, 67 people for one, that's it? That doesn't seem like a lot. For a heart drug, that's actually a really, really, really strong number. It's right in the range of statins, the cholesterol pill millions of people are already on that take for cardiovascular disease prevention, which is the same thing that these GLP-1s are doing. Exactly the same thing. And when you multiply it across millions of people now on these drugs, that's 1 in 67 turns into an enormous number of heart attacks and strokes that simply will never happen. Small per person, but huge across the population. That's not a small deal. That is the kind of number that gets a drug brand new FDA approval, which is exactly what happened, essentially. Semaglutide is now approved specifically to lower heart risk, not just for weight. But here's the really cool part. When they looked closely, the heart benefits started showing up earlier than the weight loss could explain. The bodies were protected before the fat was really gone. So it's not just you got lighter, so your heart got happier. The drugs seem to be doing something directly, calming inflammation, easing blood pressure, doing something good to the blood vessels themselves. Weight loss, yes, is a part of it, but it's not the whole story. So now let's talk about the kidneys. This one is huge because kidney disease is one of those things that wrecks people slowly and silently for years. The next trial, the FLOW trial, semaglutide in people with type 2 diabetes and chronic kidney disease. The results were so strong, they actually stopped the trial early. You only do that when the benefit is so clear, it's actually wrong to keep people on the placebo, the fake one. Here are the numbers. 3,500 participants. The relative risk reduction was 24%, a little bigger than the heart trial. And here's the interesting part. The number needed to treat was way lower, somewhere around 15 to 20 people to prevent one major kidney event versus 67 in the heart study. The drug significantly lowered the progression of kidney disease, and it got itself another FDA approval, kidney protection. I have gotten questions about kidneys and whether it harms the kidneys to be on these medications for long. So I hope you understand this is actually kidney protective. So again, this is the same theme. The protection looked like it was partly independent of weight and partly independent of blood sugar too. The drug appears to have a direct anti-inflammatory protective effect on the kidney itself. You're seeing the pattern now, right? Heart, kidney, and in both, something beyond just lose weight is happening. So let's get into fatty liver disease. So GLP-1s actually help clear this. Two big trials, the Essence trial with semaglutide and the Synergy NASH trial with tirzepatide. Essence was a semaglutide phase 3 trial reported in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2025. Also, a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. 1,197 patients, all biopsy confirmed. These had MASH, that's fatty liver, plus inflammation, plus cell damage, not just fatty liver. 72 weeks, 63% on semaglutide had their MASH resolved without worsening fibrosis, versus 34% on the placebo. And more also showed actual fibrosis improvement, 33% versus 16%, all biopsy confirmed. The second one, the Synergy NASH with tirzepatide, was a phase 2. It showed resolution of MASH without worsening fibrosis in up to 62% of patients with significant fibrosis. It's huge. So sleep apnea. Tirzepatide has actually got FDA approval for obstructive sleep apnea in people with obesity. Now you have to have moderate to severe sleep apnea, not mild. Some folks are getting off their CPAP machines, so definitely worth a shot. No pun intended. Knee osteoarthritis. Less joint pain. Some of that's just less weight on the joint, sure, but some of it looks like the inflammation piece again. Step back and look at the whole picture. Obesity is a disease, and it's a driver disease. It fuels so much of what we treat: heart disease, kidney disease, liver disease, sleep apnea, joint breakdown. They all trace back in part to the same metabolic dysfunction. So when you treat obesity at its root, you're not just shrinking a waistline. You're going after the things that are feeding all the rest. Treat the disease, and the whole cascade of downstream damage starts to ease at once. That reframes the whole thing. I'm telling you, it's not a vanity drug. This is starting to look like metabolic medicine. Now, what about those things that haven't been fully studied, but we're seeing? Addiction. This one's actually super interesting. A huge look at over 1,000 veterans found that people on GLP-1s had lower rates of alcohol, opioid, and nicotine problems. That is a huge number, and it sounds amazing. But here's the catch. That is an observational study. Nobody was randomly assigned. They just looked back at the records of people who happened to be on the drug. But I got to tell you, I actually have seen this time and time and again with my own patients. They come to me and they tell me, I just don't have a taste for beer anymore. I have no interest in alcohol. So very promising, very promising. Cancer prevention. A JAMA retrospective study looked back at people on GLP-1s and showed colon and rectal cancer reductions very consistently. We are in the regenerative, anti-aging, longevity space. Let's look at that. This one, it barely clears the bar for evidence, and there's no human trial showing GLP-1s extend lifespan. But what exists is mechanistic plausibility. They improve so many of the conditions that shorten life, like heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease. Researchers are hypothesizing a health span benefit. And the last one I'm going to point out from my integrative functional regenerative space is inflammation. So let me answer your question that hopefully you should be asking right now. How does one shot help your heart, your kidney, your liver, your joints? What is the common thread? The answer, more and more, looks like inflammation. Here's the thing about obesity. Excess fat tissue, especially the deep belly fat around your organs, the visceral fat, which is what we measure, by the way, in my clinic, isn't just sitting there. It's active. It's actually pumping out inflammatory signals. Your body is running hot, low grade, all the time. It's like a quiet fire you can't feel. And that chronic inflammation is what slowly damages blood vessels, scars kidneys, inflames the liver, wears down joints. It's the through line under almost every disease we just talked about. And the research is showing that these drugs appear to turn that fire down. And not only by shrinking the fat, there's evidence that GLP-1s have a direct anti-inflammatory effect acting on the inflammation independent of the weight loss itself. That's why the heart benefit showed up before much of the weight came off. That's why the kidney protection held even when you account for blood sugar. Same explanation over and over. You're not just lighter, you're actually less inflamed. Now, full honesty, because that's the whole point of the show, a lot of the inflammation science is still being worked out, but we can measure inflammatory markers dropping. We can see the organ benefits, and the dots connect very cleanly. But the exact how is obviously still in research. What I can tell you is the pattern is way too consistent to ignore. I literally just had a patient this week tell me within days of taking their first shot, they no longer had sausage feet. They had to tighten their little Birkenstocks. They felt less puffy. Within days of starting a low dose myself, my belly wasn't as bloated and my pants fit a little bit better. Inflammation. So I know we talked about a lot and it got really deep. Maybe just repeat this episode and listen to it again. A lot of information in here, but I felt like it was super important for me to share this with you. So if you're on a GLP-1 or you're even just thinking about it and you want it managed like the serious metabolic medicine it actually is, just call us. We do monthly GLP-1 management with physician oversight. We don't hand you a pen and say, see you next month. We watch the whole picture and we keep you safe. Go to our website and book a consultation to see how a GLP-1, even maybe a microdose, might be helpful for you. And of course, we always like to say a big thanks to our friends at Better Bodies Fitness, because every benefit we talked about today gets even stronger when you've got muscle on your frame and you're moving. Go to betterbodiesinc.com, 317-508-0839. Tell them Dr. Gilliatte referred you, and you'll actually get one free personal training session when you buy a package. So tell them I sent you. I'm Dr. Michelle Gilliatte. This is The Vital Link. I'll see you in the next episode, The Dark Side of the Shot, what nobody warns you about.